everyone, I'm Ankita Pokharel. In today's video, we're going to do a reading section on the topic Why I'm Sorry Doesn't Always Translate. Let's begin the class now.
Why I'm sorry doesn't always translate. Even after decades of cooperation in business and politics, America and Japan still trip over a seemingly simple concept, the apology. Neither culture appears to fully understand what the other means or expects. For instance, most Americans were unmoved by Toyota CEO Akio Toyoda's effusive apologies in 2010 after widespread reports of malfunctioning Prius acceleration. Japan, for its part, bristled when a US submarine commander didn't immediately apologize after colliding with and sinking a Japanese fishing boat off Hawaii in 2001. The confusion over the meaning of and occasion for "I'm sorry" extends beyond those countries. Indeed, it seems that virtually every culture has its own roots. In India, other researchers have noted apologies are far less common than in Japan. In Hong Kong, they are so prevalent and ritualized that many people are inured to them. Our own work found that a core issue is differing perceptions of culpability. Americans see an apology as an admission of wrongdoing, whereas Japanese see it as an expression of eagerness to repair a damaged relationship, with no culpability necessarily implied. And this difference, we discovered, affects how much traction an apology gains. In an initial survey of US and Japanese undergraduates, the US students were more likely to say that an apology indirectly implied guilt. The Japanese students were more likely to apologize even when they weren't personally responsible for what had happened. Perhaps for this reason, they apologized a lot more. They recalled issuing an average of 11.05 apologies in the previous week, whereas US students recalled just 4.51. In a second study, we looked at the utility of apologies for repairing trust. We asked undergraduates from both countries to imagine that they were managers and showed them a video in which an applicant for an accounting job apologized for having deliberately filed an incorrect tax return for a prior client. The Japanese students were more willing than their US counterparts to trust the candidate's assertion that she wouldn't engage in such behavior again and to offer her a job. We believe that this is owing to Americans' inclination to associate apologies with culpability. The finding that Americans link apologies with blame is in keeping, we would argue, with a psychological tendency among Westerners to attribute events to individuals' actions. Thus, it makes sense that in the US an apology is taken to mean I am the one who is responsible. It also stands to reason that in Japan, which, like many other East Asian countries, has a more group-oriented culture, apologies are heard as it is unfortunate that this happened. Researchers who have compared apologies in America and China have found a similar pattern. US apologies serve to establish personal responsibility, while Chinese ones focus on the larger consequences of the transgression. Only with a deep understanding of such differences, the executives can make effective use of the apology as a tool for facilitating negotiations, resolving conflicts, and repairing trust. And misunderstandings over apologies are just one aspect of a broad semantic disconnect between East and West that's too often ignored in the rush to globalization. Managers would do well to tune in to other cultural nuances that are easily lost in translation. So let's write the key points of the article that we have just read about apologies. The first thing we got to know is the cultural differences in understanding apologies. So the article highlights that the meaning and use of apologies vary significantly across cultures, particularly between the US and Japan, right? So next thing we got to know is Americans view apologies as admissions of guilt. So, Americans tend to perceive an apology as a direct admission of responsibility and wrongdoing. That's what is mentioned in the article given. Next thing we got to know is the views of Japanese, where they view apologies as expressions of regret and desire to repair. So it's been explained that Japanese individuals often use apologies to express remorse and a desire to mend a relationship even if they aren't directly at fault. Next thing the text mentions is frequency of apologies that differs between Japanese and Americans. So it's mentioned that Japanese individuals apologize more frequently than Americans, possibly due to their cultural understanding of apologies as less tied to direct blame. So moving on to the next point that we have gathered from the text, the impact on trust and forgiveness. So the study suggests that Americans are less likely to trust someone who has made a mistake, even if they apologize, because the apology is seen as an admission of guilt, as mentioned earlier. And Japanese individuals, on the other hand, may be more willing to forgive and trust after an apology. So that's the difference that's been mentioned. We also got to know about the cultural attribution differences. So, the article that we have just read links these differences to broader cultural tendencies. Western cultures, like in the US, tend to focus on individual actions and responsibility, while East Asian cultures, like in Japan, are more group oriented. So, essentially, the article emphasizes that understanding the cultural context of apologies is crucial for effective communication and avoiding misunderstandings. Furthermore, we also got to know about the frequency of apologies. So here, we took an account where Japanese individuals were seen apologizing much more frequently than Americans in a given week. The ratio was 11.05 versus 4.51 on average history. So the text further explains about the impact on trust, which was the second study other than the frequency of apologies made. So in a scenario involving an accounting error, Japanese students were more willing to trust and offer a job to an applicant who apologized compared to US students. So the article also suggests that Americans tend to equate apologies with admissions of guilt or culpability. That is why they may be less trusting even after an apology, right? So next thing the text highlights is the cultural tendency to attribute events. So this difference in interpreting apologies is linked to a broader cultural difference in how events are attributed. Like Western cultures in US focus on individual actions, while East Asian cultures like in Japan are more group oriented. This has been explained earlier as well. So we also got to know that meaning of apologies in different cultures varied. So in US, an apology often means I am the one who is responsible, but in Japan, it's more about expressing regret that it is unfortunate that this happened, regardless of direct personal blame. So all in all, we got to know how the interpretation and impact of apologies are deeply rooted in cultural values and tendencies, particularly concerning individualism versus collectivism and the attribution of responsibility. So it underscores the importance of cultural sensitivity in communication and conflict resolution, especially in international contexts. So this is all we got to know through the text. So here are some questions on your screen. Try doing them in an elaborative way, expressing your concerns and ideas on how each of the questions would matter to you. How did your class go today? If you have any suggestions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us at learning@tiawalk.edu.np. See you in the next class with another lesson. Thank you.